Hi there, this is Dr. Saraswati from Department of Resource Management of Nashlingam Institute for Home Science. The topic today would be on decision making, types, steps, techniques, conflicts, methods to resolve conflicts and decision making in the family. Management occurs when there is some problem to solve and some choice to make. The various steps in the management process are really a series of decisions, each based upon the last. So these decisions bring about a change, and certain important questions now arise as: does all management require decision making? Just how are decisions are being made? So are decisions in daily living commonly made alone, or they are made in groups? So this particular chapter will consider these questions and also some aids in decision making. Decision making is the process of choosing the best alternative for reaching the objective. It is a process of selecting one course of action from several alternative actions. It involves using what one knows to get what one wants. To improve one's decision making skill, one needs to know himself, his values and abilities. Values are one's opinion about what is right or good or valuable. Values give meaning to one's life by providing a basis for setting the priority, for deciding which goal or action are more worthwhile and which one are less important. Knowing the family values help the members of the family to establish goals, make the necessary decisions, and to take the needed action to meet their goals. So the values of individual family members form the basis for the values of the family group, even though some individual differences and conflicts may have to be resolved. A decision may simply be defined as choice among the alternatives or selection of and the commitment to a course of action. Decision making is a process consisting of the activity which result in the choice of alternative or the commitment to a course of action. The very first factor involved in the definition of decision making is process. Needless to say, decision making encompasses the multiple processes such as thinking, memory, evaluation, and making up mind to take action. The second most important criterion in this definition is option, and taking decision without adequate option at bay may not prove to be fruitful and apt. Hence, before jumping on to taking any action or any decision, consider the present position and where one wants to be, and then look at the multitudes of ways to reach there. The next crucial factor in the definition of decision making is the choices that are more often than not quite flustering and bewildering to make. Choices inevitably are restricted by several constraints and obstacles which make the process of making a particular choice of all the more difficult. Lastly, the action that are to be more implemented after such consideration and deliberations form the concluding step to this particular definition. It is extremely important that the decision taken are finally to execute. Now, the kinds of decision. Decisions are a very important part in life. One takes decision at every moment in daily routine. Types of decision making are determined by looking at the outcomes and the impacted entity. At the highest level, decisions are categorized into three sectors: consumer decision, business decision, personal decision. So in decision making model, establishing the type of decision makes it possible to identify the related decision that will influence, constrain, and be influenced and constrained by a specific decision. There are various types of decision making style. These can be categorized by the degree to which other people participate in the process. There is good evidence to support the argument for involving the others in decision making. However, participation can also be from time-consuming activity. When deciding on the most suitable decision-making method, it is important to consider that full participation is not required on every occasion. One cannot expect in a group all decision is to be made by the entire group. According to the type of decision, the group might prefer different system with more or less people involved, and traditionally, organization count on three different types of decision. One, strategic, relating to the identification of long-term or overall aims and interests and the means to achieve them. Second, organization, relating to the way different aspects and parts of a group are arranged with the aim of being more orderly and efficient. Third, operational, relating to the way a group or organization work on a daily basis. Habitual decision, the choices or decision made out of habit without much deliberation or product comparison. Purchases made in this way are sometimes called as habitual purchases, and because these decisions are made so rapid that they appear to be based on habit. Technical decisions relate themselves to the achievement of a single goal. Work simplification decisions are ordinarily technical decisions. The decisions that fall into this category are goal-oriented and they involve weighing the alternatives. Economic decisions are the decisions which are about on the economic issue and is most commonly about how to allocate resources among the multiple purposes. These decisions have two basic components: multiple goals and limited resources. Proper allocation of money resource plays an important role in the economic decision. One's decision involves determining which goal and what resources are required. There are many resources other than the money. Therefore, all resources are involved in these decisions. Social decisions, it is directed towards goal attainment resulting from the utilization of the resources. They occur through interaction between the individual. Everyone has been involved in social decision, and social decisions differ from economic decisions in several ways. The values, the goals and the standards are involved in this particular decision. Legal decisions, within each sphere of interaction, various rules, regulations and policies apply that pertain to one and his action within the society. One has to follow certain rules and regulations. He is also aware of the risk factors involved in not following the rules laid by. Political decisions, these are made by a group of individuals whose major purpose is to function as a single unit. The emphasis here is placed upon the procedure of how the decision is being made rather than the actual resolution of the problem or situation. Political decisions deal with how decisions are being made by the group or individual involved. They are sometimes called as procedural or structural decision. The next would be individual and group decision. One way to explore decision making is to look at the individual or group decision and their differences and their similarities. While many decisions are primarily personal or individual concern, others involve the whole family, club or group, the community and the broader society. Group members accept decisions more readily and carry them out more efficiently when they have to be involved in decision making process. There are several models of group decision making that you can put to use. Two examples are consensus and the consultation. Consensus decision making involves posing several options into the group and using the most popular option to make the decision, and consultation takes the opinion of the group into consideration when making a decision. Both methods require the group participation and call for a manager who respects the opinion and the input of the group in the decision making process. Next, we will look into the steps involved in the decision making process. The solution of any problem is made by number of steps or the phases. The number of steps or the phases proposed by different writers vary, but elements are in common with the 3 steps which is being suggested by John Dewey. 1 is, what is the problem? 2, what are the alternatives? 3, which alternative is the best? Although the paths or the steps involved are not completely clarified, there are reasonable agreement on the existence of the 3 of the 5 successive paths listed below. The first and the 5th paths are not always included. The 5 steps or the phases in the mental process of decision making are: the first one, defining the problem to be decided; second, seeking the alternative solution; third, thinking through the alternative; 4, selecting the alternative; 5, accepting the responsibility for the decision. The first one, defining the problem. The first job in decision making is recognition of that problem exists, and that finding and defining it is important. The first job is to recognition that the problem exists and the finding and defining. So one authority has pointed out that all problematic situations must be carefully searched out and often constructed, and other also consider such process as intelligent activity. The evidence of the problem may first appear as a symptom. The most visible of these frequently hide the depths of the problem. At this stage in the solution of the problem, 2 things are essential. First, a desire to find the cause leading to the problem. Second, an unemotional and unbiased view of all the circumstances within the situation. The family's value system is an important factor at this stage of decision. Individual differences are apparent in the problem identification. Second, seeking the alternative. Now, managing the resources requires a great deal of knowledge in seeking the alternative and recognizing the consequences of each. The knowledge must be quite specifically related to one or more of the resources. The amount of knowledge available varies from resource to resource. Probably the largest stock of accurate information to be drawn upon relates to money or perhaps food, and the smallest stock to time. When seeking alternatives, ideally one should become aware of all possibility. Practically, that is seldom if ever possible because of the limits of time and experience. People are more conscious of this step in decision making in some areas than in others. Experts in various fields have stressed that the importance of having alternatives in decision making. It is important as it is to have many alternatives, as there is danger of confusion with a wide variety of choices. Third in this step would be thinking through the alternative. This is the next step in decision making and is mentally following through the consequences of each step's alternative, which bring its own difficulty. Again, ideally one should foresee all the consequences, but that is not possible for various reasons. To begin with, the consequences lie in an uncertain future. It is uncertain partly because of the impossibility of foreseeing the external changes that might influence the working out of the particular alternative, and partly because of the individual feeling about it may change in the future. His anticipation may not produce the same feeling as the reality will. So this step in decision making was described years ago by John Dewey in a colorful phrase as dramatic rehearsal. It takes time to find and explore all the possible pathway, and one way in which the persons can be aided toward a more effective dramatic rehearsal of alternative is to make them see that the judgment process takes time. The popular phrase snap judgment suggests that our short time it takes to snap the fingers is not sufficient for making a wise decision. On the other hand, taking too much of time interferes with the effectiveness of the decision making. The fourth is choosing an alternative. This is the next stage, namely wherein you have various alternatives to choose from within. It is least understood of all the stages. It is of course impossible to focus upon all the known alternatives and their consequences at once. There is a limit to a number of separate items that mind can grasp at one time, and probably not over 5 over 6. So hence, if there are many alternatives, they must be considered in groups. Next step in decision making would be accepting the consequences of the decision. This step is not always include, however, fundamental. It leads the making of decision into a more complicated and the managerial process. A type of consequence to be accepted that is not always recognized is the existence of disagreement. In relation to decisions, dissonance is a lack of agreement between the knowledge of and the feeling towards an alternative selected and the knowledge and the feeling about the alternative not selected. In other words, there are usually, if not always, some things about the alternatives not selected that are attractive and desirable, and some things about alternatives selected and that are not desirable. The most important decision making process and the more different appeals of various alternatives is the greater is the dissonance. Where dissonance exists, there is unrest, and usually some effort has to be taken to reduce it. Now, the next would be importance of the knowledge in decision making. It is not enough to know the technique how to make a decision. Especially in step 2 and 3, knowledge about what is being decided is very, very essential. As stated above, finding the alternatives, which is step 2, cannot be accomplished without the knowledge. The knowledge needed in step 3 is the degree or the amount of it possessed in the relation to 1, the amount of time and effort required to get more knowledge, and 2, the risk involving making the decision. Thus, part decision making has been discussed as thought it were completely an individual matter, and of course many decisions are of personal concern only. Nevertheless, the majority of choices made by the family members concern others as well themselves. In dramatic living today, decisions are increasingly made not only by one person for the group but by all for those of who is concerned in this. Now, individual decisions are more quickly made than the group, and the quality of the group decision tend to be no higher than the contribution of the blessed member of the group. The number of the people desirably involved in making a decision is related to the number who takes a responsibility for that particular decision. On the other hand, group decisions may be better than the individual one in that more alternatives tend to be suggested, unproductive approaches are earlier deducted. Their undisputed superiority, however, lies in their greater acceptance by the group and hence in more effective carrying out of the decision once made. The development of group decision is not only a slower process than that of the individual ones, it may also be a thornier road. When conflicts arise, it is helpful to recognize that there are various levels and ways to resolving them. Now we'll look into the next one, that's resolving the conflict. For let's list 4 possible outcomes representing the different levels of adjustment in disagreements. 1. Struggle and victory on one side, resulting in dominance. 2. Voluntary submission on one side. 3. Compromise. And 4 is integration. To these 4, the authors would add 2 others at approximately the same level as integration and conversion, which is possible outcome of voluntary submission, compromise, or even dominance. And the 6th one would be acceptance of differences where unified action is not essential and integration is not possible. These 6 outcomes represent 4 different levels of harmony, of feeling or inner agreement. The important point to recognize is the difference in the feeling or inner agreement resulting in these different levels. At level 1, 2 and 3 of solution of conflict, the persons involved may be left farther apart in a feeling after the conflict than when they started. At the highest level 4, regardless of which of the 3 methods of resolving conflict is used, harmony of feeling results. The greater cleavage in feeling is at the first level, less at the third, and uncertain amount at the second. Dominance and voluntary submission. At the dominance level, one side demands and the other side is forced to obey. At the second level of resolving conflict, there is still victory on one side and submission on the other, but the understanding between the 2 sides is greater. The outward result is the same as level 1, that is one side gives in, but the inner feeling is more unified. Even a trivial disagreement may be resolved at each level of the 4 levels. Unquestionably, fundamental group harmony and disharmony results from the resolution of many small issues as well as from the results of occasional large disagreement. The next would be compromise. The level of compromise is the one often held as the most desirable to reach. Now, Follett's great contribution on the solution of conflict is pointing up the difference between it and a higher level, that is the integration. At the level of compromise, there is some voluntary yielding to on both the sides without, however, an essential harmony of feeling or resolution of the fundamental differences. Each opponent comes part way in outward action but retains his original mindset on the issue. The inner cleavage remains. This may be shown diagrammatically. The first one would be compromise level of resolving conflict. The difference of inner feeling will of course vary with the strength, importance and the duration of time. It is likely to smolder on the surface and flare up at the later opportunity. Second is convincingly. Level 1, 2 and 3 may run into conversion at the level each side that has submitted wholly or in part changes its mind at the time or later and really accept the view of its opponent. Integration. The highest level of settling conflict is that of integration. It is a creative process in which the 2 sides reach a new solution together, one with which all concerned are satisfied. It means taking an issue apart to find what agreement already exists and what genuine points of the differences are. Of those discovered, the next steps are to build upon the items of agreement as far as possible and frankly acknowledge the remaining difference. The last and to many persons, the most difficult step is to work out for a new solution which would resolve the remaining differences. It takes logical thinking to recognize the differences and likeness of thought of an issue, and it takes a desire to solve the problem, to concentrate and build upon the points of agreement so far as they exist. Using the common options or opinions of the group as a basis for a new solution makes integration both creative process which is stimulating in itself and also as a solution of conflict that brings genuine harmony of feeling between the opposing forces. In order to reach the highest level of resolving conflicts, there must be inner willingness of all the concerned. Now, possible solution at 5 levels of resolving conflicts are: dominance and submission when one person forces the use of the shelf he favors. Voluntary submission would be one person accepts the use and the other does not accept it. Compromise, use a shelf in an inconvenient place but of convenient height. Third, conversion, either or both persons become accustomed to the solution of 1, 2 and 3 and would now choose it if the decisions were made to be a new one. Integration, the original high shelf is used but the pencil sharpener is fastened under it instead of the top. Then solutions related to integration. Quaker custom of resolving situation through the sense of the meeting seems not far different in the essence from integration, and no vote is ever taken through a open. Acceptance of difference. The last way of adjusting conflict is that acceptance of the differences. It is not a different level from integration but is a different means of reaching that inner harmony of feeling which is associated with integration. Not every issue can be settled by acceptance of differences. In fact, one of the characteristics of the group living is that many things must be accepted and done alike by the entire group. There are, however, probably more areas in group living where individual differences may be respected than we ordinarily think. In conflict, sometimes a live and let live policy, when voluntarily adopted by both the sides of a controversy, may be satisfactory of unified action. It is a feeling about the differences which determines the success of this type of solution. Now I wish to conclude as each step in the managerial process is a series of decisions, some habitual and acts chiefly genuine choices of among the alternatives. Only the later are true decisions. So knowledge about the decision to be made is essentially, especially in seeking alternatives and thinking through them. Risk involved in selecting an alternative must be based on knowledge. Thus, far in this chapter, we have concentrated on analyzing the process of decision making, understanding it's unquestionably the best aid one can have in mastering it. There are, however, further aids of understanding the process of change in general and habit changing in particular, and providing a managerial experience for making the decision. So training in decision making consists essentially in having opportunities to make decisions, and these opportunities should begin with situations within the power of the decider to handle satisfactorily and gradually lead to more complex situations. So facilities in changing the habit is an aid in both making the decision and in carrying them out. Thank you.